The desert heat pressed against Morrison's garage like a physical weight, turning the air inside thick enough to taste. Wade Morrison had been rebuilding the same carburetor for 3 hours, his hands moving through the familiar motions, while his mind wandered to places he tried not to visit. The radio played classic rock, low enough to be background noise, and the other men worked in companionable silence that came from years of riding together, bleeding together, surviving together. Tucker Hayes stood beneath a lifted Dodge Ram, his Army medic tattoo visible on his forearm, as he inspected brake lines with the kind of attention that came from knowing what happened when mechanical systems failed. Leo Chen hunched over a laptop in the corner office monitoring police scanners and dispatch frequencies because information was protection, and Leo believed in being protected. Marcus Stone used a pneumatic wrench on lug nuts, each twist precise, despite hands scarred from 15 years of professional boxing before those same hands got him banned from the sport for breaking an opponent's jaw in 3 places. The garage sat on the eastern edge of Elko County, Nevada, where Interstate 80 cut through desert, and the nearest real town was 20 miles in either direction. It wasn't much to look at cinder block walls, painted industrial gray bay doors that didn't quite close flush, anymore a gravel parking lot where dust devils formed on windy days. But it was theirs, paid for with honest money from honest work, a place where men with violent pasts could build something resembling peace. Wade lowered the carburetor to his workbench and reached for a rag, wiping grease from his fingers in slow, methodical strokes. 48 years old, and he still couldn't keep his hands clean, still found motor oil under his fingernails, no matter how hard he scrubbed. His leather vest hung on a hook by the door patches, an insignia marking years of road traveled. Brothers lost battles fought. The Hells Angels logo dominated the back, a winged skull that made civilians nervous and made other riders show respect or keep distance. The little girl appeared in the bay door, opening like a ghost materializing from heat shimmer. Wade's hand stopped moving. The rag fell to the concrete floor, forgotten. Tucker's wrench went silent. Leo looked up from his laptop screen, fingers freezing mid-keystroke. Marcus straightened slowly from the tire. He'd been changing his expression, shifting from casual focus to predatory alertness in the space between heartbeats. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Dark curls stuck to her cheeks where sweat had glued them, her face flushed from exertion or fever or both. An oversized t-shirt hung past her knees, the kind of hand-me-down that spoke of poverty or neglect or both. One foot was bare, the other wore a pink sandal with the strap broken and dangling. But it was how she stood that made Wade's stomach drop into freefall. Her knees pressed together like every step was agony, her legs trembling with the effort of staying upright, her small hands gripping the hem of her shirt so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Wade crouched slowly, keeping his movements gentle, making himself smaller and less threatening. His voice came out softer than it had in years, stripped of the roughness that usually lived there. "You hurt, sweetheart." The girl nodded. Her jaw shook, whether from pain or fear or exhaustion, Wade couldn't tell. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to lean forward to hear it over the ambient noise of the highway beyond the parking lot. "My legs, I can't close them. It hurts when I try." The words hit Wade like a physical blow, not the kind of hurt from skinned knees or playground accidents. This was deep, radiating pain, the kind that came from damage rather than simple injury. He'd seen enough combat casualties to recognize the difference, had watched enough broken bodies get carried off battlefields to know when someone was walking on borrowed time. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily, that's a pretty name. I'm Wade. These are my friends, Tucker, Leo, and Marcus. We're going to help you, okay?" Lily's eyes moved past Wade to take in the other men. Their size, their tattoos, their leather vests, with patches that promised violence to anyone who crossed them. Most kids would have run. Lily just stood there, swaying slightly, too hurt or too desperate to care whether these men were safe. "What happened to your legs, Lily?" Her lower lip trembled. Fresh tears carved tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "My stepdad? He pushed me down the stairs because I spilled dinner. I landed wrong. I think something broke." Tucker's breath caught sharp enough for everyone to hear. Marcus muttered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer or a curse, hard to distinguish which. Leo stood from his desk, closing the laptop with deliberate care, his expression going flat and dangerous in the way it did when violence was coming and he was preparing for it. Wade felt the old anger rise in his throat like bile, the kind he'd spent years learning to control, to bury, to redirect into useful channels. He'd known men like Lily's stepfather, had grown up watching his own father use his mother as a punching bag, had sworn he'd never become that man, had overcompensated so hard in the opposite direction that sometimes he wondered if he'd lost the ability to be dangerous when danger was required. Then he looked at Lily's trembling legs and remembered that some men deserved exactly the kind of danger Wade had spent decades perfecting. "You came to the right place, Lily. We're going to help you. I promise." He lifted her as gently as he'd ever lifted anything, mindful of every flinch and gasp. She weighed almost nothing but a small bundle of bones wrapped in secondhand cotton and badly concealed terror. When he settled her onto the padded stool near his workbench, she gasped and gripped the seat edges hard enough to make her fingers go bloodless. "You tell anyone else about this yet?" Lily shook her head, dark curls bouncing. Her voice came out even smaller than before. "Mama said not to make trouble, said he gets mad when I talk." Wade steadied himself against the workbench. His knuckles hurt from how hard he was gripping the metal edge years of carefully cultivated control, threatening to shatter into the kind of rage that solved nothing and destroyed everything. Tucker appeared at his shoulder, voice low enough that Lily couldn't hear. "We need to move. Now." Wade nodded. He'd worked enough bar fights and back alley disputes to know that hesitation killed, that the window between intervention and tragedy was measured in minutes, not hours. He grabbed his keys from the hook, turned to Leo. "Lock everything down. Call Rachel at CPS. Tell her we're bringing in a child abuse case, and she needs to meet us at Elko General. Marcus, you're riding with me. Tucker, follow in your truck in case we need backup transport." Leo already had his phone out, fingers flying across the screen with the kind of efficiency that came from being the crew's tech specialist and information broker. Marcus rolled the bay door shut with a metallic scream that echoed off cinder block walls, threw the bolt home, grabbed his leather vest from the hook. Tucker wiped his hands on a shop rag, tossed it aside, moved toward his F-150 parked in the gravel lot. Wade crouched beside Lily again, meeting her eyes at her level, because that's what you did with frightened children. You made yourself smaller, less threatening, more human. "We're taking you to the hospital. Doctors are going to check your legs, make sure nothing's broken. It might hurt, but they'll be gentle, and I'll be right there the whole time. You understand?" Lily's voice cracked on the words. "He said if I tell anyone, he'll come find me." Wade's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He forced his expression into something resembling calm, something that wouldn't terrify a 7-year-old who'd already been terrified enough for a lifetime. "He's not coming near you, not while we're breathing. That's a promise I don't make lightly, and it's one I've never broken." Something in Lily's posture shifted, not relaxation exactly, but acceptance. She'd made her choice by walking through that bay door, had gambled everything on the hope that these rough, dangerous men might be safer than the man she'd left behind. Wade lifted her, carefully holding her against his chest, while Marcus opened the door to Wade's truck, a 10-year-old Silverado held together by spare parts and stubbornness. They settled Lily in the backseat, Marcus sliding in beside her to keep her stable during the drive. Tucker's F-150 fell in behind them as they pulled onto the highway convoy of two heading east toward Elko General. The hospital sat on a rise overlooking the Humboldt River, its 3-story structure the tallest building in 20 miles. Wade carried Lily through the automatic doors into fluorescent brightness that made everything look sterile and hostile. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant, layered over older odors of blood and fear and human suffering. A security guard near the entrance tracked them with wary eyes, hand moving unconsciously toward the radio on his belt. Wade understood the reaction. 4 Hells Angels bikers walking into a small-town ER carrying a trembling child looked like exactly the kind of situation that required backup and careful documentation. But he didn't have time for civilian nervousness or bureaucratic delays. He walked straight to the intake desk where a nurse in pink scrubs looked up from her computer screen, her expression cycling through surprised concern and professional focus in rapid succession. "What happened?" Wade's voice came out flat, stripped of emotion, because emotion wouldn't help Lily and might make the nurse think he was the cause rather than the solution. "Domestic assault. Kid was pushed or fell downstairs, doesn't matter which. She can't move her legs without pain. Needs immediate evaluation." The nurse's demeanor changed instantly, training overriding discomfort. She came around the desk, crouched beside Lily, did a quick visual assessment without touching. Can you tell me your name, sweetheart? Lily's voice was barely audible. Lily Carter. And these men brought you here? Lily nodded her hand, finding Wade's and gripping tight. The nurse's eyes moved to Wade's face, reading something there that made her decision easier. Room 4, now. They moved through the ER with purpose, past other patients waiting with less urgent problems, past posters about hand washing and flu shots into an examination room that was too bright and too cold and smelled like fear disguised as antiseptic. Wade settled Lily onto the paper-covered exam table while the nurse took vitals, asked questions in gentle tones, entered information into a tablet with swift efficiency. Tucker appeared in the doorway, having parked his truck, and jogged inside. Marcus stood just outside the room. Arms crossed, his presence communicating to anyone watching that this child was protected and any threat would have to go through him first. Leo arrived minutes later, slightly out of breath, holding his laptop case. Rachel's 20 minutes out. Sheriff's dispatch got the call too, they're sending someone. Wade nodded, not taking his eyes off Lily. She'd gone very still on the exam table, her breathing shallow and rapid, her gaze fixed on the ceiling tiles like she could will herself somewhere else if she stared hard enough. He moved to stand beside her, his voice dropping into the register he'd used with his own daughter years ago, the gentle rumble that communicated safety without demanding attention. Doctors are coming. They'll need to touch your legs to see what's hurt. You tell them if it's too much, okay? You're allowed to say when things hurt too much. Lily's eyes found his face, searching for something: permission or protection or both. Will you stay? Not going anywhere. The door opened and Dr. Sarah Mitchell entered, early 40s, with tired eyes that suggested too many shifts without enough sleep. She looked at the bikers, at Lily, at the way the child's hand gripped Wade's fingers, and made some internal calculation that landed on the side of trust rather than suspicion. I'm Dr. Mitchell. Lily, I need to check your legs and make sure nothing's seriously injured. It's going to hurt a little. These gentlemen can stay if that helps you feel safer. Lily nodded permission. Dr. Mitchell worked with practiced efficiency, examining both legs without unnecessary touching, checking joints and bones, pressing gently on areas that made Lily gasp or flinch. She ordered x-rays, sent Lily to radiology with a tech who looked nervous, transporting a child accompanied by 4 large men in leather vests. Wade rode with them, ignoring the tech's discomfort, his entire focus on Lily's pale face and trembling hands. The x-ray machine hummed and clicked, capturing images of bone and tissue. Wade stood behind protective glass, watching Lily hold perfectly still, while the tech positioned her legs at angles that made her whimper. When they wheeled her back to the exam room, she reached for Wade immediately, her small arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. 20 minutes later, Dr. Mitchell returned with a tablet, showing images Wade had learned to read during another lifetime, another hospital, another child he couldn't save. He forced those memories down, locked them in the mental box where they belonged, focused on the present moment and the 7-year-old who needed him here and now. Dr. Mitchell's voice was professional, but carried an edge of barely contained anger. Both legs are severely bruised. The left knee is partially dislocated, not fully out of socket, but enough to cause significant pain. No fractures currently visible, but she's been walking on these injuries for at least 12 hours based on the swelling pattern. She needs rest stabilizers, anti-inflammatories, and close monitoring for the next 48 hours. Wade absorbed the information, already calculating logistics: where Lily would stay, who would watch her, how to keep her safe from the man who'd done this. Dr. Mitchell gestured for him to follow her into the hallway, closing the exam room door behind them. Tucker took up position inside the room with Lily, his presence offering comfort without words. In the corridor, Dr. Mitchell pulled up additional images on her tablet, her expression hardening. This is what I wanted to show you privately. When I pulled her medical history, I found older x-rays from 6 months ago. She presented at urgent care with a fractured left radius that healed poorly. The notes say she fell off playground equipment. 3 months before that, cracked ribs. The documentation claims she tripped over a dog. Wade's blood went cold. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone who'd worked with trauma victims or domestic violence survivors. Single incidents could be accidents. Repeated injuries with convenient explanations were abuse hiding in plain sight. This wasn't the first time. Dr. Mitchell shook her head, her jaw tight with fury directed at people who hurt children and systems that failed to protect them. Not even close. Someone's been hurting this child for at least a year, probably longer. The injuries are spaced out just enough that different providers missed the pattern, or they saw it and didn't report it. You're reporting it now. It wasn't a question. Dr. Mitchell's eyes flashed with determination that matched Wade's own protective rage. Already filed the mandatory report. CPS will be here within the hour. I've also flagged her file so that any future injuries trigger automatic investigation. This child won't fall through the cracks again. Not on my watch. Boots on linoleum announced another arrival. Sheriff Tom Hensley walked toward them with the deliberate pace of law enforcement, assessing a situation before committing to action. 52 years old, with weathered skin that spoke of decades under Nevada's sun, he'd been Elko County Sheriff long enough to know which fights mattered and which were political theater. His eyes moved from Wade to Dr. Mitchell and back again, reading the tension like a professional. Got a call about child abuse case. This the victim. Dr. Mitchell nodded, showing him the x-rays on her tablet. Sheriff Hensley studied the images with the kind of attention that suggested he'd seen too many cases like this, had learned to recognize patterns that less experienced officers missed. His expression darkened incrementally with each swipe, each new image revealing another injury, another explanation that didn't quite fit. Name Lily Carter, 7 years old, lives with her mother Dana and stepfather Travis Holbrook. Sheriff Hensley's head came up sharply, his entire posture shifting into something harder and more dangerous. Travis Holbrook, construction foreman, works for his family's company. That's the one, Wade confirmed, reading volumes in the sheriff's reaction. Sheriff Hensley pulled Wade aside, voice dropping low enough that they wouldn't be overheard by passing staff. I've suspected Travis for years. Had a domestic violence charge 3 years ago involving Dana. She showed up at the station with bruises on her throat, filed a report, then withdrew it 48 hours later. The case got sealed so fast, it made my head spin. His brother Andrew works in the district attorney's office, deputy DA with political aspirations, and the kind of connections that make problems disappear. Corruption. The word hung between them, bitter and true. Sheriff Hensley didn't deny it, just shrugged with the weary acceptance of someone who'd learned that justice and law enforcement weren't always the same thing. I couldn't prove anything concrete. Dana recanted Travis had alibis, the case evaporated. But I flagged his name in our system. Any call to that address gets elevated to me personally. We've been there twice in the last year for noise complaints, once for a neighbor reporting screaming. Each time Dana said everything was fine, wouldn't let us inside without warrant, and Travis played the wounded innocent. Wade's hands curled into fists at his sides. He'd known men like Travis Holbrook his entire life, had watched them hide behind respectability while destroying everyone within reach. The only thing worse than the abusers were the systems that protected them, the brothers who used their positions to shield violent men from consequences. Can you arrest him? With this evidence, absolutely. Dr. Mitchell's report plus Lily's statement gives me probable cause. But Wade, Sheriff Hensley's expression, turned grim, apologetic. Andrew's going to throw every legal obstacle in our path. He'll get Travis the best defense attorney money can buy. He'll challenge evidence. He'll drag this out until witnesses forget and public attention moves on. I'll do everything I can, but I need you to understand what you're up against. I don't care about obstacles. I care about keeping that little girl safe. Something like respect flickered across Sheriff Hensley's face. He nodded once, sharp and definitive. Then we're on the same side. I'll execute the warrant tonight. Bring Travis in for questioning. With medical evidence this clear, I can hold him at least 48 hours pending charges. The sheriff headed toward the intake desk to coordinate with hospital security. Wade returned to the exam room where Tucker still sat with Lily, who'd been given ice packs for her knees, and a coloring book someone had donated to the pediatric supply closet. She worked carefully on a picture of butterflies, her small hands moving in concentration that was clearly therapeutic, focusing on something she could control when so much of her life had been chaos. Marcus appeared in the doorway, jerking his head toward the hallway. Wade stepped out, closing the door gently behind him. We've got a problem. Wade's jaw tightened. Travis. Pulled up in the parking lot 3 minutes ago, drunk from the look of his driving. Security's tracking him, but he's heading for the entrance. The confrontation Wade had been bracing for was arriving ahead of schedule, fueled by alcohol and desperation. He moved quickly through the ER toward the automatic doors, Tucker and Marcus flanking him, Leo bringing up the rear. They emerged into late afternoon heat just as Travis Holbrook stumbled through the entrance, his bulk filling the doorway, his voice booming across the waiting area, loud enough to make every head turn. "Where the hell is she? Where's my daughter?" Travis stood 6'2" with construction worker shoulders, hands scarred from years of manual labor, face flushed red from rage and whiskey. He reeked of alcohol strong enough to smell from 10 feet away, his movements jerky with the kind of drunk anger that made men dangerous and unpredictable. His eyes swept the waiting room, landing on Wade and his crew, narrowing with immediate hostility. You're the biker trash who kidnapped my kid." Wade stepped forward slowly, hands visible and non-threatening, positioning himself between Travis and the hallway that led to Lily's room. His voice came out flat and cold, stripped of emotion, because emotion would escalate this, and escalation would accomplish nothing except scaring an already traumatized child. "Nobody kidnapped anyone. Lily walked into my garage hurt, and I brought her to get medical attention. That's called being a decent human being." Travis lurched forward, closing distance, his breath carrying the sour smell of cheap whiskey and cheaper rage. "She's my kid. I'll handle her discipline. You got no right." Discipline doesn't put a 7-year-old in the hospital with a dislocated knee and bruises covering both legs. Travis's face went darker, blood vessels standing out on his forehead. His right hand curled into a fist, telegraphing intent seconds before he acted on it. Wade saw the punch coming, saw Travis's weight shift and his shoulder drop, had enough time to prepare, but chose not to move. The fist connected with his chest, weak, uncoordinated drunk swing that Wade absorbed without stepping back. Tucker and Marcus moved instantly, positioning themselves on either side of Wade, creating wall of muscle and leather that Travis would have to go through to reach anyone else. Leo pulled out his phone, recording everything with the calm efficiency of someone who understood that documentation was protection. Hospital security arrived at a run, 2 guards who took one look at the situation and called for backup. Travis tried to push past Wade toward the hallway, his voice rising to a roar. "That's my kid! You can't keep me from my kid. I'll call the cops." Sheriff Hensley appeared from the ER entrance radio in hand, his presence changing the dynamics immediately. "I am the cops, Travis, and you're drunk in a hospital trying to access a minor who's filed a protective complaint." Travis spun to face the sheriff, his expression cycling through rage to confusion to calculation. When he spoke, his voice took on wounded innocence that was almost convincing, the kind of performance that probably worked on people who didn't know better. "Sheriff, these bikers took my daughter. I just want her back. She's clumsy, always falling, but she needs to come home where I can take care of her." Sheriff Hensley's expression didn't change, his voice carrying authority that came from decades of calling out liars. Mitchell filed a mandatory abuse report. Your stepdaughter has injuries consistent with assault, not accidents. And you're intoxicated in public, which gives me grounds to detain you regardless of anything else. Travis lunged at Wade, then past the point of reason or self-preservation, his roar of, "This is your fault," accompanied by wild swing that Wade sidestepped easily. Hospital security grabbed Travis's arms, pulling him backward while he fought and screamed threats. Sheriff Hensley motioned for backup officers who'd just arrived, and together they wrestled Travis out through the automatic doors into the parking lot, where his shouts echoed off pavement and faded into distance. Wade watched them load Travis into the back of a patrol car, his knuckles aching from how hard he'd kept his fists clenched at his sides. Tucker touched his shoulder, grounding him. "You handled that right. Didn't escalate. Didn't give him anything to use against us. Wanted to put him through the wall. I know, but you didn't. That's what matters." They returned to the exam room, where Lily sat very still on the table, her coloring book forgotten, her eyes huge and terrified. She'd heard the shouting, had probably recognized Travis's voice, knew exactly who'd been out there threatening violence. Wade crouched beside her, his voice gentle despite the adrenaline still spiking through his system. "He's gone. Sheriff took him away. He can't reach you here." Lily's voice came out so small it barely qualified as sound. "He'll come back. He always comes back." The truth of that statement hit Wade like a hammer. Travis might be in custody now, but Sheriff Hensley had been clear. Andrew Holbrook would use every resource at his disposal to get his brother out, to make this problem disappear, to ensure that the Carter family's dirty secrets stayed hidden behind closed doors where polite society preferred them. 48 hours wasn't enough time to build a case strong enough to survive legal assault by someone with political connections and unlimited resources. Dr. Mitchell returned with paperwork and instructions, her voice all business, but her eyes showing sympathy that suggested she understood exactly what Lily was facing. I'm admitting her overnight for observation. The knee needs monitoring and she should be on IV fluids given her dehydration levels. But more importantly, it keeps her here under fierce security where her stepfather can't access her. How long can you hold her? 24 hours medically. After that, she either goes home or into state custody pending investigation. The words state custody made Wade's stomach twist. He'd seen what happened to kids in the system bounced between foster homes, separated from siblings, lost in bureaucratic shuffle, where nobody advocated for them because nobody had time or resources to care about individual children when hundreds needed help. Lily needed stability, needed people who would fight for her specifically rather than processing her file along with dozens of others. Footsteps in the hallway announced another arrival. Rachel Brennan walked through the door carrying a briefcase that looked older than she was, her expression showing exhaustion that came from being overworked and underpaid and caring too much to quit. 41 years old with silver threading through her dark hair, she'd been a CPS caseworker for 15 years, long enough to know which battles could be won and which required choosing the least bad option from a menu of terrible choices. She looked at Wade at the bikers flanking him at Lily on the exam table, clutching her coloring book. Then she looked at Dr. Mitchell's tablet, showing x-rays and medical documentation, and her jaw tightened with the particular fury of someone who'd seen too many cases like this and never got used to it. Rachel Brennan, Child Protective Services. I got Leo's call and Dr. Mitchell's mandatory report. Tell me what happened. Wade recounted the afternoon, Lily walking into the garage, her words about being pushed downstairs, the hospital assessment, the old fractures proving pattern of abuse, Travis's confrontation in the ER. Rachel took notes on her own tablet, asked clarifying questions, documented everything with the thoroughness that suggested she knew this case would end up in court and every detail mattered. When Wade finished, Rachel turned to Lily with gentleness that came from years of interviewing traumatized children. Lily, I need to ask you some hard questions. If anything makes you too uncomfortable, you tell me and we'll stop. Okay. Lily nodded, gripping Wade's hand harder. Rachel kept her voice soft, non-threatening, giving Lily space to answer at her own pace. How many times has Travis hurt you? Lots of times. More than 5. Lily nodded. More than 10? Another nod, smaller this time, shame creeping into her posture like she was responsible for the violence inflicted on her. Rachel's expression didn't change, but Wade saw her hand tighten on her tablet. Does he hurt your mother too? Sometimes. She has bruises, she says, her from falling, but I don't think she falls that much. Rachel documented everything, her professional mask firmly in place, but Wade recognized the barely suppressed rage in how carefully she kept her voice level. She was good at her job, which meant she'd learned to channel fury into action rather than letting it paralyze her. When the interview concluded, Rachel pulled Wade into the hallway, closing the exam room door to give them privacy. Lily can't go back to that house. Given the documented pattern of abuse and tonight's violent confrontation, I have grounds for immediate removal and emergency placement. What does that mean? Foster care. I have one home available, but it's already at capacity 4 kids, including 2 with special needs. Lily would be sleeping on a couch in a chaotic environment with overworked foster parents doing their best, but stretched impossibly thin. Wade's chest tightened, the familiar weight of helplessness pressing down on him. He'd felt this before in another hospital, watching another little girl suffer while systems and bureaucracy and limited resources conspired to make everything harder than it needed to be. There has to be another option. Rachel hesitated, clearly weighing whether to offer information that might be inappropriate or whether the child's welfare outweighed procedural caution. Finally, she spoke, voice low enough that only Wade could hear. Emergency kinship placement. It's designed for situations where family members can provide temporary care. The legal definition of kinship has some flexibility. It's usually grandparents or aunts and uncles, but courts have approved close family friends in exceptional circumstances. We're not family friends. We met her 3 hours ago. But she trusts you. That's evident. And given that her biological family includes the abuser and his brother, who'll use his position to obstruct justice, maybe family, needs to be defined as people who will protect her rather than people who share DNA. Wade processed the implications. Rachel was offering a path forward, one that bent rules without breaking them, one that prioritized Lily's immediate safety over procedural perfection. What would that require? Background checks on everyone in the household. I'd need to inspect your residence, ensure it meets basic safety standards. Daily visits from CPS. Strict supervision. And you'd have to agree that at any time if I determine placement isn't in Lily's best interest, she goes into foster care immediately. Wade didn't hesitate. Then she stays with us. Rachel studied his face, reading something there that made her decision easier. She pulled a thick stack of paperwork from her briefcase, setting it on the counter of the nurse's station. These need to be completed tonight. I'll need full backgrounds on Wade Morrison, Tucker Hayes, Leo Chen, and Marcus Stone. Social security numbers, employment history, criminal records, everything. I'll run expedited checks and have preliminary clearance by morning. Leo appeared at Wade's shoulder, somehow having anticipated exactly what would be needed. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, handing it to Rachel with a slight smile. Already compiled. Complete background files on all four of us. Employment verification tax returns for the last 5 years. Rental agreements for the garage property character. References from local businesses. Everything's there. Rachel took the drive, eyebrow raised in impressed surprise. You always this prepared. Information is survival. I believe in being thorough. Rachel plugged the drive into her laptop, scanning files with practiced efficiency. Wade watched her expressions shift as she read initial wariness, giving way to grudging respect. Whatever Leo had compiled was apparently comprehensive enough to satisfy even the most rigorous caseworker. You're not what I expected, Rachel admitted after several minutes. Tucker's voice carried dry humor. We get that a lot. Rachel returned to the exam room with Wade explaining the temporary placement arrangement to Lily in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Lily's face brightened with the kind of relief that made Wade's chest ache. I can stay with you. Just for a little while until the legal stuff gets sorted out. But yeah, you can stay. Lily hugged him, then her small arms barely reaching around his chest, her face pressed against his shoulder. Wade held her carefully, aware of her injuries, aware of how fragile trust was when built on the foundation of trauma. He'd failed to protect his own daughter from cancer's inexorable progression. Maybe he could succeed in protecting this one from human cruelty that at least had the courtesy of being something he could fight. Dr. Mitchell released Lily into Wade's custody with strict instructions. Rest, elevation, anti-inflammatories every 6 hours, follow-up appointment in 3 days. She fitted Lily with lightweight knee braces, demonstrated proper use, made Wade repeat the care instructions until she was satisfied he understood. The hospital provided crutches sized for a child, which Lily regarded with suspicion, but accepted when Wade showed her how to use them without putting weight on her injured knee. They loaded into Wade's truck, Lily in the back seat with Marcus beside her for stability, Tucker following in his F-150, Leo riding shotgun with Wade and monitoring radio chatter for any signs that Travis had been released or that trouble was heading their way. The drive back to Morrison's garage took 20 minutes, the truck eating up highway miles, while sunset painted the desert in colors too beautiful for a day that had held so much ugliness. The garage sat exactly as they'd left it. Bay doors still locked, everything secure. But it looked different now through Lily's eyes, not rough or industrial, but potentially safe, a place where men worked with their hands and protected people who needed protecting. Wade carried Lily inside while the others moved with quiet coordination that came from years of living together, working together, surviving together. Marcus cleared space in the office, the only room with a door that closed and a window that locked from inside. Tucker brought blankets from his apartment above the garage, soft fleece that had seen better days, but was clean and warm. Leo found an old teddy bear in a donation box they kept for Christmas charity drives, slightly worn, but with all its stuffing intact. Wade adjusted the space heater, positioned it where Lily would feel warmth without risking burns, dimmed the overhead fluorescent light to something less harsh. They set up a makeshift bed using shop blankets, layered thick enough to be comfortable. Lily watched with wide eyes, processing this transformation from garage into sanctuary, these rough men becoming careful and gentle in ways that contradicted every assumption society made about bikers. This is for me. Wade smiled, the expression feeling rusty from disuse. All yours. Door locks from inside so you control who comes in. Heater works blankets warm, and we'll be right outside if you need anything. Lily settled onto the blankets, carefully adjusting her braced legs with visible relief. Her exhaustion was finally catching up, adrenaline crash hitting hard now that safety allowed her body to acknowledge how much today had cost. She clutched the donated teddy bear, looking up at Wade with eyes that held more trust than he'd earned in 3 hours, but would spend however long it took to deserve. Will you be here if I wake up? The question hit Wade harder than Travis's punch had, carrying weight of every child who'd ever been abandoned, every promise broken by adults who were supposed to protect. He crouched beside her makeshift bed, voice steady and certain. Every time. You wake up scared, you wake up hurting, you wake up for any reason at all. I'll be here. Lily nodded, satisfied by certainty in his tone. Her eyes drifted, closed consciousness, surrendering to exhaustion that had been held at bay by fear. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, small chest rising and falling in rhythm that suggested deeper sleep than she'd probably experienced in months. Wade stood slowly, joints protesting after hours of tension. He closed the office door quietly, leaving it cracked just enough that they'd hear if Lily called out. Outside, his crew had assembled in the main garage bay, their expressions grim. Tucker spoke first, voice low enough not to carry. "What's our perimeter security?" Marcus gestured to the building. "Front entrance locks from inside, reinforced with deadbolt. Back door same. Bay doors are steel reinforced, would take serious equipment to breach. Windows are high and small, possible entry points, but difficult." Leo pulled up security camera feeds on his laptop. "I've got motion sensors on all approaches, cameras covering parking lot and access roads. Anything moves within 50 yards, we get alerts. Also monitoring police scanner. If Travis gets released, or if dispatch sends units our way, we'll know in real time." Wade absorbed the tactical assessment, recognizing the familiar pattern of men who trained for combat, adapting those skills to protect rather than destroy. They'd all served in different capacities: Wade in Marines, Tucker in Army, Marcus in prison-adjacent violence that taught similar lessons about watching your perimeter and sleeping light. Shifts, 2 men awake at all times, 4-hour rotations, nobody gets past us. Tucker nodded agreement. "I'll take first watch with Marcus. You and Leo get some sleep, you've been running on fumes since this afternoon." Wade wanted to argue, wanted to maintain control, because control was the only thing standing between Lily and everything that wanted to hurt her. But Tucker was right. Exhaustion would make him sloppy, and sloppy got people killed. He nodded reluctantly, heading for the small apartment above the garage that he called home. Sleep didn't come easy. Wade lay on a mattress that had seen better decades, staring at ceiling, stained by old leaks and older regrets, his mind refusing to shut down. Every sound from below made him tense, expecting attackers, or Travis returned, or catastrophe manifesting. But the night remained quiet except for normal garage sounds, metal cooling wind, rattling loose panels, the distant hum of traffic on I-80. His phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m., pulling him from shallow sleep that barely qualified as rest. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, Wade opened the text message. The words glowed harsh in the darkness. "You made a big mistake, biker. She's coming home one way or another." No signature, no identifying information, just threat delivered through digital distance that made the sender feel safe. Wade deleted the message, his jaw set hard enough to ache. He'd expected this, expected Travis or Andrew or someone in their orbit to push back, to refuse to accept that their carefully maintained control had been disrupted by a 7-year-old with courage to ask for help and bikers with willingness to provide it. He descended the stairs quietly, finding Tucker and Marcus in the main bay, both alert despite the late hour. He showed them the message without comment. Tucker's expression went cold. Marcus's hands curled into fists that had ended professional boxing careers and probably more than a few bar fights. "They're testing us," Tucker said, "seeing if threats will make us back down. Then they're going to learn we don't back down." Wade moved to the office door, cracking it open just enough to see Lily still sleeping peacefully, her small form barely visible beneath the blankets. Watching her breathe felt like the most important thing he'd done in 5 years, felt like purpose. Returning after so long being absent felt like maybe the universe was offering him chance to get something right after getting so much wrong. He closed the door gently and returned to his crew. His brothers, the men who'd stood with him through worse situations than angry stepfathers and corrupt prosecutors. His voice came out quiet but absolute, carrying the weight of promise that would be kept no matter what violence or sacrifice was required. Whatever comes next, whatever they try, they don't reach her. We hold this line. We protect her until the system catches up and does its job. And if the system fails, we find another way. She doesn't go back to that house. She doesn't get hurt again. Whatever it takes. Tucker and Marcus nodded, understanding implicit in their silence. They'd all made similar promises before in different wars and different contexts, and they'd kept those promises even when keeping them cost blood, insanity, and pieces of themselves they'd never get back. This was just another line to hold another battle to fight another child who deserved protection from a world that had already hurt her too much. Dawn would bring new challenges. Rachel's inspection background check results, Travis's inevitable release from custody, Andrew's legal maneuvering. But dawn was hours away, and in the darkness, Wade stood watch over a sleeping child who'd walked into his garage limping and afraid and trusting him with the kind of faith that could destroy a man if he failed to honor it. The fight had only begun, but Wade Morrison had spent his entire life learning how to fight, and he'd learned something else too. Some things were worth fighting for, even when you knew the fight would cost everything. Lily Carter was worth fighting for. And Wade would hold this line or die trying. Morning arrived with desert sunlight cutting through the high windows of Morrison's garage, turning dust motes into suspended gold. Wade had managed 3 hours of sleep, broken into 15-minute increments, his body trained by decades of military service and dangerous living to rest while remaining alert for threats. He descended from his apartment to find Tucker brewing coffee in the small kitchenette they'd installed years ago, the rich smell cutting through the ambient odors of motor oil and metal. Leo sat at his desk, eyes bloodshot from monitoring security feeds and police scanners all night. Marcus leaned against the bay door, arms crossed, looking fresh despite having taken the midnight to 4 watch. They'd perfected this rhythm during their years together, the unspoken coordination of men who'd learned that survival depended on everyone executing their role without needing explicit instructions. Wade moved to the office door, easing it open quietly. Lily stirred beneath the blankets, her dark curls spread across the makeshift pillow. For a moment, she looked peaceful, vulnerable, in the way children should be allowed to be vulnerable without fear, without calculating whether the adults in their lives would hurt them today. Then her eyes opened, taking seconds to orient herself, and Wade watched fear flicker across her face before memory caught up, and she recognized where she was. Her voice came out small and uncertain. "You're still here." Wade crouched beside her bed, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Told you I would be. How'd you sleep?" Lily pushed herself into sitting position, wincing as a movement jarred her braced knee. No yelling, no footsteps in the hall, nobody banging on the door. It was quiet. The way she described absence of violence as notable feature broke something in Wade's chest. Children shouldn't measure quality of sleep by lack of terror, shouldn't consider quiet a luxury rather than baseline expectation. He helped her stand carefully, supporting her weight while she found her balance on the crutches Dr. Mitchell had provided. "Good kind of quiet," Lily nodded, small smile appearing despite obvious pain. "Yeah, good." They emerged into the main garage where Tucker had assembled breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, simple food prepared with the kind of attention that suggested he took feeding people seriously. Lily ate slowly, careful movements, suggesting her body was still cataloging yesterday's damage. Halfway through her eggs, she set down her fork, her voice dropping to confessional whisper. "He used to bang on my door at night. I never knew when. Sometimes he'd just stand there breathing on the other side until I cried, then he'd laugh and walk away. Other times he'd come in angry about something that wasn't my fault and—" She stopped, unable or unwilling to finish. Wade's hands tightened on his coffee mug until the ceramic creaked. Tucker's jaw worked. Marcus's expression went flat and dangerous. Leo closed his laptop with controlled precision that suggested he was recalculating threat assessments and contingency plans. Wade forced his voice to stay gentle despite rage burning in his throat. "You're not there anymore. No one here bangs on doors. No one comes into your space without permission. You get to feel safe now." Lily absorbed his words with the careful consideration of someone testing whether promises could be trusted. Then she returned to her breakfast, eating with slightly less tension in her shoulders. Rachel Brennan arrived at 9:30, her briefcase looking even more battered in morning light. She'd clearly gotten minimal sleep. Her clothes suggesting she'd worn them yesterday and grabbed them off a chair this morning rather than closet. But her eyes were sharp, assessing the garage with professional thoroughness that missed nothing: the clean floors, the organized tools the office converted into bedroom, the way these rough men moved around Lily with careful gentleness. She pulled Wade aside while Leo showed Lily how to play a simple computer game that didn't require much movement. Background checks came back clean. Minor infractions from decades ago, nothing disqualifying. Your employment records show stable income, property ownership, tax compliance. Character references were surprisingly glowing. You've apparently built a reputation in this county as men who fix things and don't cause trouble. Wade heard the unspoken question in her tone. We're not the stereotype, never have been. The leather and patches scare people who need scaring and make the rest feel safer when they need protection. Turns out that's useful in a town like this. Rachel studied his face, reading truth there. The placement is approved for 2 weeks initially, subject to daily supervision and immediate review if concerns arise. I'll visit every day, sometimes unannounced. You'll document meals, sleep patterns, any behavioral changes. Lily starts therapy next week. There's a trauma specialist in Elko who works with abuse victims. And Wade, she paused, ensuring she had his full attention. If you fail this child, if you prove unworthy of the trust she's placed in you, I will personally ensure you never work with vulnerable populations again. I don't care about your reputation or your connections or how many people vouch for you. She comes first. Always. Wade met her eyes without flinching. If I fail her, you won't need to punish me. I'll have done that myself. Something in his tone made Rachel pause, her professional mask slipping slightly to reveal human curiosity beneath. This feels personal for you, more than just Good Samaritan helping a hurt kid. Why? Wade was quiet for a long moment, warring with himself about how much truth to share, whether vulnerability would undermine his credibility or strengthen it. Finally, he spoke, voice rough with grief that time had dulled but never eliminated. I had a daughter, Emma. She'd be 12 now if cancer hadn't taken her 5 years ago. She was 7 when she got diagnosed, same age as Lily. Leukemia, acute lymphoblastic. We fought for 18 months. Chemo, radiation, experimental treatments, everything medical science could throw at it. His voice cracked despite attempts at control. I watched her get smaller every day. Watched her hair fall out. Watched her stop being able to walk. Watched her fade until there was nothing left but bones and breathing. I sat beside her hospital bed for 18 months, held her hand, told her stories, promised her we'd beat this together. And I couldn't save her, couldn't do a damn thing except watch her die. Rachel's expression softened, professional distance giving way to genuine compassion. I'm so sorry. When Lily walked through that door yesterday, limping, hurting, needing help, I could actually provide. I saw Emma. I saw my second chance. The universe doesn't offer many of those. I failed to protect my own daughter from disease that didn't care how much I loved her. Maybe I can succeed protecting this one from human cruelty that I can actually fight. Rachel absorbed this revelation, understanding dawning in her eyes. Wade's fierce protectiveness wasn't random kindness. It was grief channeled into redemption, father, who'd lost his child finding purpose in saving someone else's. The motivation was deeply personal, potentially complicated, but undeniably genuine. Does Lily remind you of Emma? Wade considered the question honestly. Not physically. Emma was blonde, built like a runner, loved books, and hated getting dirty. Lily's different, but the way she's scared but trying to be brave. The way she trusts despite having every reason not to. That's familiar. That's what kids do when adults fail them. They keep hoping the next adult will be different. I need to be different. Rachel nodded slowly, making notes on her tablet. The court hearing is scheduled for 3 days from now. Family Court Judge Patricia Reeves presiding. Travis has hired Stephen Voss as his attorney, expensive, effective, known for getting abusers off on technicalities. They're going to argue that you're unfit caretakers, that Lily belongs with her biological family, that this is all misunderstanding blown out of proportion. They're going to lose. Rachel's expression suggested she'd seen too many cases go wrong to share his certainty. I hope so. But Andrew Holbrook has significant influence in the DA's office. He can manipulate evidence, pressure witnesses, delay proceedings. We're fighting uphill battle here. The office door opened and Lily appeared, moving carefully on her crutches, her expression showing determination that belonged on someone decades older. I want to tell the judge what happened. Everything. About Travis pushing me, about all the other times, about Mama not helping. I want to tell the truth. Rachel knelt to Lily's eye level, her voice gentle but serious. That's incredibly brave. But testifying means Travis and his lawyer will ask you hard questions, will try to make you doubt yourself or get confused. It's difficult even for adults. Are you sure you want to do that? Lily's jaw set with resolve that made Wade's chest ache with pride. He hurt me for years and nobody stopped him because I was too scared to talk. I'm not scared anymore. Not with Wade here. Not with all of them protecting me. I want to tell the truth so he can't hurt anyone else. Rachel looked at Wade, then back at Lily, clearly processing the transformation a single day had created. Terrified child, becoming empowered survivor because someone had finally offered safety and belief. She made notes, nodded slowly. Okay, we'll prep you for testimony. I'll be there the whole time. And Wade, she glanced up, you'll be in the courtroom. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. A knock on the bay door interrupted them. Marcus moved to answer, hand reflexively, going to his waistband, where Wade knew he kept a knife, old habits from prison years that had never quite left. He cracked the door, assessed the visitor, then opened forwardly to admit a woman Wade recognized with sick certainty even though he'd never seen her before. Dana Carter stood in morning sunlight, looking like a ghost of herself, thin to the point of gaunt, dark circles under eyes that couldn't hold contact, wearing long sleeves despite Nevada heat, in obvious attempt to hide bruises she knew would be visible. 32 years old, but worn down by whatever life with Travis Holbrook entailed, she moved with the careful precision of someone whose body remembered violence, even when her mind tried to forget. Her voice came out barely above whisper. I want to see my daughter. Rachel stepped forward, professional authority reasserting itself. Mrs. Carter, I'm Rachel Brennan, CPS caseworker assigned to Lily's case. You understand that visitation is supervised given the circumstances. Dana nodded, her hands twisting together in nervous gesture that never stopped. I just need to see her. Need to know she's okay. Lily had gone very still, her knuckles white on the crutch, handles, her breathing shallow. Wade moved closer without crowding her, offering proximity that could become protection if needed. Dana saw her daughter and something broke in her expression, relief and grief and shame combining into emotion too complex to name. Baby, why'd you run away? You scared me. Lily's voice came out harder than Wade had heard it, angry, bleeding through fear. He hurt me. You know he did. Dana flinched like she'd been slapped. Her gaze dropped to the floor, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. You fall a lot, Lily. You're clumsy. Always have been. The lie hung in the air between them, obvious and pathetic and desperately necessary for Dana's self-preservation. Lily's voice rose, 7-year-old fury at being gaslit by the person supposed to protect her. I didn't fall. He pushed me. He broke my ribs when I was 5, fractured my arm at 6, and you told the doctors I was clumsy. You lied for him. You always lie for him. Dana's composure cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face, her voice breaking into sobs. You don't understand. He'll kill us both if I talk. He said he would. He showed me how. She stopped, seeming to realize she'd said too much, that confession was dangerous even here, surrounded by witnesses who couldn't protect her from what waited at home. Rachel guided Dana to a chair, her professional mask firmly in place, despite clear sympathy for a woman trapped by circumstances and fear. Mrs. Carter, we can protect you. Domestic violence resources, shelters, legal advocacy. You don't have to go back to him. Dana laughed, bitter sound, devoid of humor. I have nowhere to go, no job, no money, no family who'd take us in. If I leave Travis, we're homeless. If I testify against him, he'll... She stopped again, that same fearful catch, suggesting threats she couldn't articulate without making them more real. Wade had been silent, letting Rachel handle the interaction with professional competence. But something about Dana's broken resignation triggered memories of his own mother, of watching her accept violence because leaving seemed impossible, of the day she'd finally escaped, only to find poverty wasn't much better than abuse. His voice came out harder than intended, stripped of sympathy he couldn't quite muster. He pushed a 7-year-old downstairs and you're defending him. Dana's head snapped up, eyes flashing with defensive anger. I'm not defending him. I'm explaining reality. You think it's easy leaving an abusive man when you have no resources and he has all the power. You think I haven't tried. The room went silent. Tucker shifted uncomfortably. Marcus watched with the careful attention of someone who'd seen domestic violence dynamics play out too many times. Leo's fingers twitched toward his laptop like information could solve problems that emotions couldn't. Rachel's voice cut through the tension, measured and professional. Mrs. Carter, your daughter has documented injuries consistent with years of abuse. Dr. Mitchell's report will be admitted as evidence in court. The question isn't whether Travis hurt Lily, that's established fact. The question is whether you're willing to protect her going forward or whether you're going to prioritize your relationship with her abuser. Dana covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that carried the weight of years of accumulated trauma and impossible choices. I love my daughter. I've always loved her. But I'm trapped, and I don't know how to get out. Lily's voice, small but certain, cut through her mother's breakdown. Then stay trapped. But don't ask me to come back to that house. Don't ask me to pretend everything's okay so you don't have to be brave enough to leave. The statement landed like physical blow. Dana looked at her 7-year-old daughter with expression mixing shock and heartbreak, seeing clearly for the first time that her child had grown harder and more realistic than any child should have to be. Rachel let the moment breathe, let the truth settle before speaking gently. I'm going to give you information about shelters and legal aid. I can't force you to leave, but I can offer resources if you choose to protect yourself and your daughter. The court hearing is in 3 days. How you testify will determine whether you maintain any custody rights or whether Lily stays in protective placement permanently. Dana stood shakily accepting the business cards and pamphlets Rachel offered, shoving them into her purse with movements that suggested she'd hide them before Travis could find them. She looked at Lily one more time, opened her mouth to say something, then closed it when no adequate words appeared. Finally, she just whispered, I'm sorry, and left through the bay door, disappearing into morning heat that made her look like she was evaporating. Lily stood very still after her mother left, processing emotions too complicated for her age. Wade crouched beside her, not touching, but offering proximity. You did good. Telling the truth, even when it hurts, is the bravest thing anyone can do. Lily's voice cracked. Why won't she leave him? Why does she pick him over me? The question had no good answer, no explanation that would satisfy a child's need for parental love to be simple and unconditional. Wade settled for truth. Your mama's scared. Fear makes people do things that don't make sense to anyone outside it. That doesn't excuse her choices, doesn't make them right. But it means her failure isn't about you. You didn't do anything to deserve this. None of it is your fault. Lily absorbed his words with visible effort, wanting to believe them, not quite able to yet. She'd carry that question for years, maybe forever. Why wasn't she worth leaving for? Worth protecting, worth choosing. Wade knew because he'd carried similar questions about Emma. Why couldn't he save her? Why wasn't his love enough? Why did the universe take his daughter despite everything he had sacrificed? Some questions didn't have answers that brought peace. You just learned to carry them. Leo's voice cut through the heavy moment, his tone carefully neutral. Wade, need to show you something. They moved to Leo's desk where his laptop displayed financial records, construction contracts, bank statements, information that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone without legal warrants or hacking skills that lived in gray areas of legality. Leo had clearly been busy during the night using his particular talents to dig into Travis Holbrook's background. Travis works for Holbrook Construction Family Business, started by his father, now run by his brother Andrew, alongside the political career. Company has city contracts worth $8 million annually building municipal facilities and low-income housing. Very lucrative, very connected. Leo pulled up another file. 3 years ago, Dana filed domestic violence charges. Police report shows bruising on her throat, testimony that Travis choked her during argument. She recanted 48 hours later. Case got sealed so fast it suggests Andrew used his DA connections to make it disappear. Official explanation was insufficient evidence, but the timing indicates pressure. Marcus leaned over Leo's shoulder, expression darkening. So Andrew's been covering for his brother for years, using his position to obstruct justice. Gets worse. Travis has significant gambling problem, 43,000 in debt, to a legal bookmaker named Vincent Cross, who operates out of Carson City. Payment schedule shows Travis has missed last 3 installments, is in arrears by 17,000. Cross is known for enforcing debts through violence. I'd bet Travis's escalating abuse at home correlates with increasing financial pressure. Wade processed the implications. Travis wasn't just abusive, he was desperate, cornered by debts he couldn't pay, and protected by a brother whose political career depended on maintaining family reputation. Desperate men were unpredictable, dangerous in ways that made them harder to anticipate. Can we use this, expose the corruption, the gambling debts, undermine Travis's credibility before court? Leo's expression showed reluctance. Some of this information I obtained through methods that wouldn't be admissible in court. The financial records, maybe. The sealed DV case, possibly. But revealing I hacked into private systems could backfire, make us look like the criminals. We'd need to be strategic about what we use and how. Tucker had been listening from across the garage, his military strategic thinking engaged. Save it for the hearing. When Travis's lawyer tries to paint him as upstanding citizen, we drop evidence of gambling debts and sealed domestic violence charges. Doesn't matter how we got it if it's true, and they can't prove illegal acquisition. Rachel, who'd been diplomatically pretending not to hear this discussion of potentially illegally obtained evidence, checked her watch. I have 3 more home visits today. Lily, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Wade, keep documenting everything. Meals, activities, how she's adjusting. The more evidence we have of stable placement, the stronger our case. After Rachel left, the day settled into something approaching routine. Tucker taught Lily basic first aid, how to clean wounds, apply bandages, recognize when medical help was needed. The lessons were practical but also therapeutic, giving her skills and knowledge that built sense of control. Leo showed her how to code simple computer programs, breaking down complex problems into manageable steps. Marcus demonstrated motorcycle maintenance, letting her hand him tools while he changed oil, his gentle precision with machinery translating into patient teaching. Wade watched them integrate this child into their world with naturalness that surprised him. They were teaching her skills, yes, but also giving her what she'd been denied: adult attention that wasn't conditional on fear, masculine presence that was protective rather than threatening, a model of what family could look like when it functioned properly. 2 days passed in similar rhythm. Lily's knee improved with rest and anti-inflammatories, her movements becoming less pained. Nightmares still woke her some nights. Wade would hear her cry out and rush to her room, sitting beside her bed until fear subsided and sleep returned. But the good nights were outnumbering the bad, her smile coming more easily, her laughter sounding genuine rather than performative. Rachel's daily visits confirmed what Wade could see. Lily was thriving in ways that 2 weeks of care shouldn't accomplish, but trauma survivors could when finally given safety. The caseworker's initial wariness had transformed into cautious approval, her notes documenting a placement that was exceeding expectations despite its unconventional nature. The morning of the 3rd day, Rachel arrived with different energy tension, replacing her usual professional calm. Court hearing is tomorrow. I need to prep Lily for testimony. And Wade, there's something you should know. Travis hired Stephen Voss, but Voss withdrew yesterday citing conflict of interest. Travis's new attorney is Jennifer Hartley. She's worse. Specializes in discrediting abuse victims, known for aggressive cross-examination that traumatizes children on the stand. She'll try to break Lily. Wade's hands curled into fists. Then we make sure Lily's prepared. Rachel spent 2 hours with Lily role-playing courtroom scenarios, teaching her how to answer questions, clearly preparing her for hostile cross-examination without terrifying her about what to expect. Lily handled it with remarkable composure, her resilience evident in how she processed coaching and incorporated feedback. When Rachel left, Lily asked if she could go to the community center down the road, the rec program for local kids, a chance to interact with children her age and feel normal for a few hours. Wade hesitated, hyper-aware of security concerns, but Rachel had suggested socialization was important for Lily's recovery. After careful consideration, he agreed. Tucker and Marcus would rotate guard duty, one of them always within sight of Lily's security protocols applied to civilian setting. They drove her to the community center in the pickup, Marcus staying with her, while Tucker positioned himself where he could observe all approaches. The center was typical small-town facility playground equipment that had seen better decades: basketball court, with faded paint indoor rec room, with donated toys and games. Lily joined group of kids playing on the swings, her movements still careful because of her knee, but her smile genuine, and other children accepted her without question. 40 minutes in Tucker's instincts triggered white van in the parking lot engine, running no visible reason to be there. He moved closer to Marcus, voice low. White van, 3 o'clock. 2 occupants, both male, watching the playground. Marcus casually repositioned himself between Lily and the van, his body language shifting into combat readiness, disguised as casual observation. The van's passenger door opened. Man emerged mid-30s construction build, moving with purpose toward the playground. Tucker intercepted him smoothly, blocking his path without being overtly threatening. Help you with something. The man's eyes flicked to Lily, then back to Tucker. Just picking up my niece. Which one's yours? Hesitation, just a fraction too long. The one in the purple shirt. Lily wasn't wearing purple. Tucker's hand moved to his phone. That's interesting, since all these kids are regulars and nobody here matches that description. Try again, what are you really doing here? The man's posture shifted, aggression, replacing deception. His hand went to his waistband where weapon might be concealed. Marcus moved instantly, crossing the playground in 3 strides, positioning himself to intercept if violence manifested. Several children looked up, sensing adult tension. A second man emerged from the van, taller and heavier, clearly backup for the first. He approached Lily directly, ignoring Tucker, and Marcus' voice pitched to sound friendly. Hey there, your daddy sent us to pick you up. Time to go home. Lily backed away, eyes wide with recognition that these men weren't safe, weren't here to help. You're not my daddy. I don't know you. The first man lunged, grabbing Lily's arm. She screamed. Tucker moved with speed that came from military training, tackling the man away from Lily, both of them hitting playground dirt hard enough to raise dust cloud. The second man pulled knife from pocket, brandishing it with threatening intent that made other parents start screaming. Marcus hit him like freight train, disarming him with brutal efficiency, born from 15 years of professional fighting. The knife skittered across pavement. Marcus drove his knee into the man's solar plexus, dropping him gasping and incapacitated in seconds. The community center director had already called 911. Police sirens approaching fast, getting louder. The first man struggled against Tucker's weight, shouting threats that carried desperation. You're dead, you and all your biker friends. Nobody stops us. Nobody. Tucker shifted his grip, cutting off the man's air until he went limp. Not unconscious, just compliant fight, leaving him when oxygen became negotiable resource. Sheriff Hensley arrived with 3 deputies, taking in the scene, 2 subdued attackers, terrified children, parents clustering protectively around their kids, Tucker and Marcus standing over the men with expressions that promised additional violence if required. The sheriff cuffed both attackers, reading them rights with weary efficiency of someone who'd arrested too many violent criminals. He pulled Wade aside once Tucker had called him to the scene. Attempted kidnapping, assault with deadly weapon, witness intimidation. They're going away for this. Who hired them? Sheriff Hensley's expression said he knew but couldn't prove. They're keeping quiet, lawyered up immediately. But I'd bet my pension Travis orchestrated this through intermediary. Can't trace it directly back to him, but the timing is too convenient. Day before custody, hearing 2 men try to grab Lily. That's not coincidence. Wade looked at Lily, who was clinging to Marcus with shaking hands, her earlier confidence shattered by the proximity to violence. The progress she'd made over 3 days had just taken serious hit trauma, reasserting itself in ways that would require weeks or months to process. That night, Lily wouldn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow was potential threat. She insisted on sleeping in the main garage with all the lights on, surrounded by the men who'd protected her. Wade sat beside her makeshift bed, holding her hand, while she finally exhausted herself into fitful sleep, punctuated by nightmares that made her cry out. Tucker appeared at Wade's shoulder, voice pitched low. This isn't sustainable. They're escalating. Next time they might succeed. Then we end this. Tomorrow in court, we show Judge Reeves exactly who Travis Holbrook is. We use Leo's evidence. We put Lily on the stand if she's still willing. We force the system to choose her safety over procedural comfort. And if the judge rules against us, Wade's voice carried finality that bordered on threat, then we find another way. Legal system isn't the only option. It's just the first one we're trying. Tucker understood what Wade wasn't saying. If the courts failed, they'd take Lily somewhere Travis couldn't reach consequences, and legality be damned. Men like them knew how to disappear when necessary, how to protect what mattered, even if protection meant becoming outlaws in truth rather than appearance. Leo emerged from his office, laptop in hand, face illuminated by screen glow. Found something else. Travis has been embezzling from Holbrook Construction. 200,000 over 2 years, hidden in shell accounts and fake vendor payments. Files are buried deep, but I reconstructed the money trail. He's been stealing from his own family's company to cover gambling debts. Marcus whistled low. That gives us leverage. Andrew won't want this exposed. It destroys their political reputation and could tank city contracts. More than leverage, Wade said slowly. It's proof that Travis is desperate enough to steal from family. Shows pattern of escalating behavior when cornered. Judge needs to see, this needs to understand that returning Lily to that house isn't just dangerous, it's potentially deadly. They spent the rest of the night preparing, organizing evidence, rehearsing testimony, planning contingencies. Wade called Rachel at midnight despite the late hour, outlined what they discovered. She listened with professional silence that suggested she was carefully not asking how they'd obtained certain information, then agreed the evidence was compelling enough to present. At 3 a.m., motion sensors triggered. Wade's phone lit up with alerts from Leo's security system. Someone was approaching the garage via back road, headlights off, moving with stealth that suggested hostile intent. Everyone moved to defensive positions instantly. Marcus at the front entrance, Tucker covering the back, Leo monitoring cameras, Wade staying with Lily. The vehicle stopped 50 yards out, idling in darkness. Through night vision's scope, Marcus retrieved from his truck. They could see it was Travis's pickup. He sat behind the wheel, making no move to approach, just watching the building with calculation that was somehow more threatening than direct assault. 10 minutes passed. 15. Travis didn't exit the vehicle, didn't call out, didn't reveal his purpose. Finally, he reversed, carefully backing down the access road until he disappeared into desert darkness. Sheriff Hensley called minutes later. He'd been monitoring from his own position down the highway, tracking Travis since his release from custody earlier that evening. He's testing your defenses, seeing how alert you are, whether you're prepared. Tomorrow in court is where the real fight happens. He's trying to rattle you tonight, make you sloppy. Wade checked on Lily, still sleeping, despite the alert exhaustion overriding vigilance. Her trust that Wade would protect her was absolute, which made the weight of responsibility feel like physical pressure on his chest. We're ready, Wade told the sheriff. Whatever comes tomorrow, we're ready. But standing in the darkness, watching the road where Travis had appeared and vanished, Wade wondered if anyone was ever truly ready for the moment. Everything hinged on decisions made by strangers in positions of authority, where justice was more procedural than moral, and outcomes depended on who told the most convincing story. Tomorrow would decide whether Lily stayed safe or returned to the house that had broken her. Tomorrow would reveal whether the system designed to protect children actually did so, when protection required believing the powerless over the powerful. Tomorrow would test whether 4 bikers and a 7-year-old girl could stand against corruption and violence and institutional failure. Wade returned to Lily's side, settling into the chair beside her bed. Her small hand found his in sleep, gripping tight like he was anchor, keeping her from drowning. He held on, promising silently what he'd promised aloud, that she wouldn't go back, that he'd fight until there was nothing left to fight with, that this child would not become another casualty of adults who prioritized convenience over conscience. Dawn was hours away. The court hearing loomed, and in the darkness, Wade Morrison kept watch over a sleeping child who'd placed her survival in his scarred hands and trusted him not to fail. He wouldn't fail. Whatever it cost, whoever it hurt, however far he had to go. He wouldn't fail her. The Elko County Courthouse rose from desert landscape like judgment rendered in concrete and glass, its 3 stories casting morning shadows across parking lot where Wade's truck sat among vehicles that belonged to lawyers and bureaucrats and people whose power came from paperwork rather than physical presence. Wade helped Lily from the backseat, steadying her as she adjusted crutches that she needed less each day, but still provided psychological comfort, visible proof of injury, tangible evidence that her pain was real rather than imagined. Tucker, Marcus, and Leo flanked them as they crossed pavement, already radiating heat despite the early hour. Rachel met them at the courthouse entrance, her expression showing strain of caseworker who'd staked professional reputation on unconventional placement and was about to learn whether instinct had been wiser than protocol. Security screening felt invasive but necessary. Wade emptied his pockets, removed his belt, submitted to wanding that treated everyone like potential threat regardless of why they'd come seeking justice. Lily watched the process with wide eyes, absorbing another lesson about how official systems worked. Suspicion, first trust earned through compliance power, exercised through procedure. The courtroom occupied the third floor accessible via elevator that moved with arthritic slowness. Its interior was everything Wade expected from small-town family court wood paneling, meant to convey gravitas benches worn smooth by decades of desperate people, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look either guilty or ill. American flag in the corner, Nevada state seal on the wall, Bible on the clerk's desk, for swearing oaths that some people honored and others treated as formality. Travis Holbrook sat at the defense table with his attorney Jennifer Hartley, a woman whose expensive suit and perfectly styled hair communicated competence purchased at premium rates. Travis had cleaned up, fresh-shaved suit that probably cost more than Wade's truck hair combed and face arranged an expression of wounded confusion that suggested he was the real victim here. His eyes found Lily across the courtroom, and something predatory flickered there before he buried it under mask of concerned parenting. Jennifer Hartley looked exactly like what she was hired weapon designed to destroy credibility and demolish testimony, someone who'd built career on making abuse victims question their own memories. Late 40s manicured to perfection, voice that could shift from honey to razors depending on a strategic necessity. Wade guided Lily to the bench behind Rachel's table, positioning himself between her and Travis, and, like physical barrier, could prevent emotional damage. Tucker, Marcus, and Leo sat in the gallery, their leather vests drawing disapproving looks from court staff who'd clearly already decided what kind of people wore such things. The bailiff's voice cut through ambient noise. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Reeves. Judge Reeves entered with presence that made the room feel smaller. 58 years old with silver hair pulled into severe bun, she'd been presiding over family court for 16 years, long enough to have seen every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to game the system. Her expression suggested she trusted no one and believed nothing without overwhelming evidence. She settled behind the bench, reviewing case files with a tension that made Wade simultaneously hopeful and terrified. This woman would not be swayed by emotional appeals or surface appearances. She'd demand facts, proof, evidence that met legal standards regardless of moral certainty. Case number 2024 FC 0847, in the matter of Lily Carter emergency custody placement. Ms. Hartley, you may present. Jennifer Hartley stood with practiced grace, her opening statement delivered with combination of sympathy and righteous indignation that Wade recognized as performance rather than genuine emotion. Your Honor, this case represents tragic misunderstanding, escalated by well-meaning but misguided intervention. Travis Holbrook is a loving stepfather who made a regrettable mistake in a moment of stress. His stepdaughter Lily fell downstairs after he raised his voice during discipline, an accident, not assault. Mr. Holbrook immediately felt remorse, sought to ensure Lily received medical care, and has completed anger management coursework to prevent future incidents. She gestured toward Travis, who nodded with appropriate shame. Meanwhile, Lily has been placed with 4 men who are members of Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club, an organization with documented criminal ties, history of violence, and lifestyle fundamentally unsuitable for raising a 7-year-old girl. Mr. Holbrook has stable employment, owns his home, can provide financially and emotionally. He's ready to welcome Lily home with new commitment to patience and understanding. The speech was polished, strategic, designed to reframe abuse as accident and protection as kidnapping. Wade felt rage building in his throat but forced it down. Emotion would undermine their position. They needed facts, documentation, evidence that couldn't be dismissed. Rachel stood, her voice lacking Hartley's polish, but carrying conviction that came from believing every word. Your Honor, the medical evidence tells a different story. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's report documents not just current injuries, but pattern of abuse spanning years. Fractured radius 6 months ago, cracked ribs 3 months before that, repeated bruising, consistent with assault rather than accidents. This is not isolated incident. its escalating violence finally serious enough that Lily sought help. She pulled up images on tablet, displaying them on courtroom monitor. X-rays showing old fractures, photographs of bruising, medical documentation that made Travis's claim of single accident impossible to maintain. Emergency placement with Wade Morrison has been successful by every metric. Lily is healing physically and emotionally, engaging with therapy, showing resilience that comes from finally feeling safe. The men Ms. Hartley characterizes as dangerous have provided care, protection, and stability that Lily's biological family never did. This court must prioritize child safety over family reunification when those goals are mutually exclusive. Judge Reeves studied the medical images with expression that suggested she'd seen too many cases like this, had learned to recognize patterns that less experienced judges missed. Ms. Hartley, how do you explain the old injuries documented in Dr. Mitchell's report? Jennifer Hartley didn't miss beat, her response prepared and delivered with confidence that made lies sound like truth. Lily is an active, somewhat clumsy child. The previous injuries occurred during normal childhood activities, playground accidents, tripping, while running the kind of minor trauma that emergency rooms see daily. The fact that different providers treated her on different occasions prevented them from recognizing what was simply pattern of normal childhood clumsiness. Rachel stood again, voice hardening. I'd like to call Dr. Sarah Mitchell to testify regarding those normal childhood injuries. The doctor took the stand, swore the oath, and proceeded to methodically destroy Hartley's narrative. She walked the judge through each injury, explained why the fracture patterns were inconsistent with falls, demonstrated how bruising location indicated hands gripping rather than impact with ground. Her testimony was clinical, devastating, impossible to dismiss as biased opinion. Jennifer Hartley's cross-examination attempted to undermine Mitchell's credibility, suggesting she was overreacting based on bias against men like Travis. But the doctor held firm, her professional expertise armoring her against attacks designed to create doubt. I've treated hundreds of pediatric trauma cases. I know the difference between accident and assault. This child was systematically abused, and any physician reviewing this evidence would reach the same conclusion. Judge Reeves made notes, her expression unreadable. She looked at the gallery where Travis sat, trying to maintain innocent confusion, then at Lily sitting beside Wade with hand gripping his sleeve. I'd like to hear from Wade Morrison. Mr. Morrison, please take the stand. Wade crossed the courtroom, feeling every eye tracking him, the leather vest he'd deliberately chosen to wear, the tattoos visible on his forearms, the scars that told stories he'd never fully explain. He swore the oath with hand on Bible, settled into the witness chair, and met Judge Reeves's assessing gaze without flinching. Rachel led him through the events of 3 days ago, Lily walking into the garage, her statement about being pushed, the decision to seek medical care, Travis's confrontation at the hospital. Wade recounted facts without embellishment, letting events speak for themselves. Then Jennifer Hartley stood for cross-examination, and Wade braced for the attack he knew was coming. Mr. Morrison, you're a member of Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club, correct? I am. An organization with documented ties to criminal activity, including drug trafficking, weapons violations, and violent assault. Wade's voice stayed level. Some chapters have engaged in criminal activity. Ours has not. We're mechanics who ride motorcycles and help veterans reintegrate into civilian life. Hartley pulled up document on her tablet, displaying it for the court. You have criminal record, bar fights, assault charges from 20 years ago. Misdemeanors from my 20s. I served my time, paid my fines, haven't been arrested in 2 decades. Still hardly the background one would choose for child care provider. Rachel objected, but Judge Reeves overruled, indicating Wade should answer. My past isn't perfect, but I learned from mistakes, built legitimate business, contributed to my community. The question isn't who I was. It's who I am now and whether Lily feels safe with me. She does. That's what matters. Hartley shifted tactics, her voice taking on false sympathy. You lost a daughter, didn't you, 5 years ago? The question landed like physical blow. Wade's hands tightened on the witness chair arms, old grief surging up his throat. Rachel half rose to object, but Wade shook his head slightly. Hiding from truth would only make it powerful. Yes. Tell the court about Emma. Wade's voice came out rough, stripped of the control he'd maintained until now. Emma was my daughter. She was 7 years old when she was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We fought for 18 months, chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. I sat beside her hospital bed every day, held her hand, told her stories, promised we'd beat it together. His voice cracked completely. She died anyway. I watched her get smaller every day until there was nothing left but bones and breathing. I couldn't save her. Couldn't do a damn thing except hold her while she faded. The courtroom had gone silent, even Hartley looking uncomfortable with weapons she'd chosen to wield. Judge Reeves leaned forward slightly, her expression showing first crack in professional neutrality. Wade continued, words pouring out unchecked. When Lily walked into my garage limping, hurting, needing help, I saw Emma. I saw my second chance. I failed to protect my own daughter from disease that didn't care how much I loved her. Maybe I could succeed protecting this one from human cruelty. I can actually fight. He looked at Lily, his voice dropping to whisper that carried through silent courtroom. I can't bring Emma back, but I can save Lily, and I will die before I let that man hurt her again. Jennifer Hartley had expected to use Emma's death to paint Wade as emotionally unstable, as someone projecting grief onto Lily rather than genuinely caring for her. Instead, his raw honesty had created sympathy, had shown motivation that was deeply personal, but undeniably genuine. She attempted to recover. So you're using Lily to replace your dead daughter? Rachel shot to her feet. Objection. Counsel is deliberately mischaracterizing testimony. Judge Reeves sustained the objection, her voice carrying warning. Ms. Hartley, rephrase or move on. Hartley recognized she'd lost this exchange, returned to her seat with forced composure. Judge Reeves looked at Wade, still sitting in the witness chair, clearly moved despite years of judicial detachment. Mr. Morrison, in your professional opinion, as someone who's cared for Lily these past days, what would returning her to Travis Holbrook's custody do to her psychological state? Wade didn't hesitate. It would destroy her. She's finally feeling safe, finally sleeping through the night, finally believing that adults can protect rather than hurt. Sending her back would teach her that the system doesn't care, that speaking up doesn't matter, that she's powerless. It would break something in her that might never heal. Judge Reeves nodded slowly, making more notes. She called for 10-minute recess, disappearing into her chambers while the courtroom erupted in whispered conversations. Wade returned to the bench where Lily immediately hugged him, her small voice breaking. You really won't let me go back? Wade held her carefully, mindful of her healing knee. Not while I'm breathing, kiddo. That's a promise. When court reconvened, Rachel called Dana Carter to the stand. Dana entered through side door looking like she hadn't slept, her eyes red from crying or lack of rest or both. She moved to witness chair with visible reluctance, understanding that testimony given here would determine her future relationship with her daughter. Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Carter, do you believe Travis Holbrook poses danger to Lily? The question hung in air, heavy enough to suffocate. Donna stared at her hands at Travis, who was radiating silent threat from defense table at Lily, who watched with expression mixing hope and resignation. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, barely audible, yes. The courtroom exploded. Travis half stood, fury breaking through his carefully maintained composure. Jennifer Hartley looked blindsided, her entire defense strategy crumbling. Judge Reeves banged gavel, restoring order. Through sheer authority, Rachel pressed forward. Can you elaborate? Dana's voice strengthened, years of suppressed truth finally finding exit. He's hit me for 3 years, choked me, threatened to kill me if I left. I watched him hurt Lily, and I did nothing because I was terrified. But watching these men, she gestured to Wade and his crew, risk everything to protect my daughter when I couldn't, I can't lie anymore. She turned to Travis, her voice shaking but determined. You broke her ribs when she was 5, fractured her arm at 6. I made excuses, told doctors she was clumsy because you said you'd kill us both if I talked. But you almost killed her this time, and I'm done. Dana's full confession poured out years of escalating violence, financial control that kept her trapped, threats against her family, Travis's gambling addiction, the sealed domestic violence case that his brother had made disappear. Each revelation landed like grenade, destroying the facade Hartley had constructed. Jennifer Hartley attempted damage control, tried to suggest Dana was unstable or coerced, but the woman's testimony carried weight of truth, too long suppressed. Judge Reeves listened with expression that suggested she was recalculating everything she'd assumed about this case. During Hartley's cross-examination, Dana broke completely. Tears streamed down her face, voice cracking with accumulated grief and shame and rage at herself for failing to protect her daughter. I thought I was choosing survival. Thought keeping us in that house with food and shelter was better than being homeless. But survival isn't living. And I was teaching Lily that women accept violence, that love means tolerating abuse. I was destroying her to avoid discomfort. She looked at Lily, her voice dropping to whisper, "I'm so sorry, baby. I failed you. These strangers did what your own mother couldn't. They chose you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I'm done lying to protect the man who hurt us both." Judge Reeves called another recess. In the hallway, Leo approached Rachel with flash drive, handing it over with expression that suggested he understood they were crossing legal lines but believed outcome justified methods. Financial evidence. Travis has been embezzling from Holbrook Construction $200,000 over 2 years hidden in shell accounts. Every transaction documented, trail complete. He's been stealing from his own family to cover gambling debts. Rachel took the drive, her face showing she was deliberately not asking how Leo obtained this information. She returned to courtroom when recess ended, approaching the bench with request to present additional evidence. Judge Reeves reviewed the files Leo had compiled, her expression darkening with each page. "Ms. Hartley, were you aware your client has been engaged in systematic embezzlement from his employer?" Jennifer Hartley looked genuinely surprised. Clearly, Travis had neglected to mention this particular complication to his attorney. She stammered response about needing time to review evidence, but Judge Reeves was already signaling the bailiff. "Sheriff Hensley, please execute warrant for Travis Holbrook's arrest on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and theft." The courtroom descended into chaos. Travis exploded from his chair, his careful facade shattering completely. He lunged toward Lily, roaring incoherently about betrayal and vengeance, about how she'd destroyed his life, about how he'd make her pay. Wade moved instantly, intercepting Travis and driving him backward into defense table that collapsed under their combined weight. Sheriff Hensley and 3 deputies converged, pulling Travis away while he fought and screamed. They wrestled him to the floor, cuffed him, read him rights he was too enraged to hear. His voice carried across courtroom even as they dragged him toward holding cells. "You destroyed my life. My brother will bury you. You'll never be safe, never." Wade stood slowly, checking himself for injury, finding none. Travis's final outburst had revealed exactly who he was, not wounded father but violent man, who viewed Lily as possession rather than person, who cared more about control than her welfare. Judge Reeves restored order through multiple gavel strikes, her voice cutting through lingering chaos. "This court will take 30-minute recess while I review all evidence presented. We will reconvene for my ruling." Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Wade sat with Lily and hallway Tucker, bringing them water from fountain down the hall. Marcus and Leo maintaining perimeter security, like they were guarding forward operating base in hostile territory. Rachel paced, reviewing her notes, preparing for whatever arguments might still be required. Finally, the bailiff summoned them back. Judge Reeves sat behind her bench, looking older and more tired than she had at case start, carrying weight of decision that would determine a child's future. "In 23 years presiding over family court, I have never encountered case quite like this. The evidence presented reveals pattern of systematic abuse by Travis Holbrook, financial crimes indicating escalating desperation, domestic violence against Dana Carter, and corruption that allowed this situation to persist unchecked." She looked at Travis's empty chair, then at Dana, who sat in gallery crying quietly. "Mrs. Carter, your testimony showed courage, but it came late. Your failure to protect your daughter earlier contributed significantly to her trauma. While I recognize the complex dynamics of domestic violence, the fact remains that Lily is not safe in your custody while you rebuild your life and address your own trauma." Dana nodded, accepting judgment she knew was coming. Judge Reeves turned to Wade. "Mr. Morrison, your background gave me significant pause. Hell's Angels affiliation, criminal history. However dated, unconventional lifestyle, these are not typical qualifications for childcare. However, the evidence is overwhelming that Lily has thrived in your care. Medical reports show improved physical healing. Psychological assessments indicate decreased anxiety and increased sense of safety, and her own statements make clear she trusts you completely." The judge paused, clearly weighing decision that would set precedent and invite scrutiny. This is highly irregular custody arrangement, but Lily's welfare must take precedence over procedural comfort. Therefore, I am granting full temporary custody to Wade Morrison for a period of 6 months, with supervised visitation rights for Dana Carter, contingent on completion of domestic violence recovery program and individual therapy. Mr. Holbrook's parental rights are terminated pending criminal proceedings. CPS monitoring will continue with monthly reviews. She looked at Lily directly, her voice softening. Young lady, you showed tremendous courage coming forward. The adults in your life failed you, but you refused to accept that failure as permanent. You advocated for yourself when no one else would. That's remarkable, and you should be proud. Lily's voice came out small but certain. Thank you, Your Honor. Court is adjourned. The gavel strike felt like punctuation on chapter that had been too long coming. Wade stood slowly processing the ruling that had just fundamentally altered his life. He'd come to court hoping for temporary extension, expecting to fight for weeks or months. Instead, he'd been granted custody that was as close to permanent as the system allowed without formal adoption proceedings. Lily hugged him with force that would have hurt if he'd cared about such things. Tucker clapped his shoulder. Marcus nodded approval. Leo permitted himself a rare smile. Rachel approached with expression mixing relief and professional satisfaction. You did good, all of you. Lily's lucky to have found you. Wade's voice came out rough with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. We're the lucky ones. She trusted us when she had every reason not to. That's gift you don't waste. They exited the courthouse into afternoon heat, the sun brutal after air-conditioned interior. Wade was helping Lily navigate stairs when movement in parking lot triggered every combat instinct he'd ever developed. Travis had somehow escaped custody, deputy later admitted to being bribed by Andrew Holbrook, who'd arranged brother's release through corruption that would eventually cost him his career. Travis charged across pavement, his face twisted with rage and desperation, piece of broken mirror clutched in his hand as improvised weapon. He was screaming incoherently about justice and betrayal and how Lily had destroyed everything. Marcus moved first, intercepting Travis with tackle that sent both men crashing into parked car hard enough to trigger its alarm. The mirror shards slashed Marcus's forearm, drawing blood that looked black in harsh sunlight. Tucker arrived seconds later, helping subdue Travis while Leo called 911 and positioned himself between the fight and Lily. Wade shielded Lily with his body, feeling her shake against him, her progress toward healing temporarily shattered by proximity to the man who'd hurt her. Sheriff Hensley arrived at sprint from courthouse entrance, additional deputies converging from multiple directions. They pulled Travis away from Marcus this time, securing him with enough force and supervision that escape would be impossible. Travis, in handcuffs, bleeding from split lip where he'd connected with car hood, still managed to fix his gaze on Wade. If I cannot have her, you won't either. This isn't over. Wade's response was quiet but carried across parking lot with absolute certainty. It's already over. You lost. And Lily's finally free. Paramedics treated Marcus's slash wound 12 stitches scar he'd carry permanently, badge of honor he'd wear with pride. Sheriff Hensley took statements, documented everything for what would become lengthy list of additional charges against Travis. Jennifer Hartley had disappeared, probably already distancing herself from client whose case had imploded spectacularly. By the time they returned to Morrison's garage, exhaustion had set in, adrenaline crash combined with emotional processing that left everyone drained. But underneath exhaustion was relief, satisfaction, sense that they'd fought impossible battle and somehow won. 3 weeks later, Lily started at Pinewood Elementary School. Her first day included assignment to share about family, and Wade waited nervously to hear how she'd handled question about her unconventional living situation. When he picked her up that afternoon, her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, pulled him aside. Lily gave most remarkable presentation I've heard in 20 years of teaching. She stood in front of class and said, "My name is Lily. I live with my dad, Wade, and his friends Tucker, Leo, and Marcus. They're bikers, but they're not scary. They saved me when I was hurt. They taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who protects you, who chooses to love you, even when they don't have to." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were wet. She told her classmates that being strong doesn't mean not being scared. It means asking for help when you need it. That she'd been scared to tell anyone what was happening to her, but she did, and people listened. She encouraged any child dealing with scary situations to speak up, promised them there are people who will help. The teacher shook her head in wonder. Every child in that classroom was completely silent, hanging on her words. When she finished, they gave her standing ovation. That girl is going to change lives, Mr. Morrison. Wade felt pride swell in his chest, the kind that came from watching someone become stronger than their trauma, watching resilience manifest in ways that defied every expectation society placed on abuse survivors. 6 months after the custody hearing, Morrison's garage had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The office where Lily slept had been properly converted into bedroom. Real bed, colorful curtains, shelves for books and toys that accumulated through donations from townspeople who'd followed the story and wanted to help. The garage itself had expanded operations, hiring 2 additional mechanics and taking on more community repair work. But the biggest change was Emma's house. Wade had never touched the settlement money from Emma's medical malpractice case, $500,000 that sat in account gathering interest, while Wade couldn't bring himself to spend it because spending felt like profiting from his daughter's death. Finally, he'd found purpose worthy of that money. Emma's house was shelter and resource center for abused children funded entirely by the settlement, plus donations from Hell's Angels chapters across 3 states. Tucker ran medical clinic providing free care to kids who couldn't afford treatment. Leo taught technology skills, giving disadvantaged youth marketable abilities. Marcus led self-defense classes teaching children how to protect themselves without becoming violent. And Wade managed overall operations, ensuring that no child would ever feel as alone and helpless as Lily had felt walking into that garage 6 months ago. Dana Carter visited weekly, supervised by Rachel, who documented gradual rebuilding of mother-daughter relationship. Dana had completed domestic violence recovery program, worked part-time at library, lived in modest apartment funded by assistance programs. She was fragile, still healing from years of abuse, but making genuine effort to become parent Lily deserved. Their interactions were tentative, complicated, but moving slowly towards something resembling functional. Travis Holbrook was serving 8 years for embezzlement, 4 years for assault sentences, running concurrently, possibility of parole in 6. His brother Andrew had resigned from DA's office, under investigation, faced disbarment proceedings for corruption. Holbrook Construction had lost city contracts, family reputation destroyed by crimes that couldn't be hidden or explained away. Evening 6 months after custody ruling, Wade and Lily worked together on old Harley Davidson that would never run again but served as teaching tool. She handed him wrenches, learned the names of parts, asked questions about how engines worked. Her knee had healed completely. Crutches, long abandoned, mobility fully restored. She set down the socket wrench she'd been holding, her voice carrying weight of question she'd been building courage to ask. Wade? Yeah, kiddo. Long pause where she seemed to test words in her mind before releasing them. Can I call you Dad? Wade's hand stilled on the engine block. Emotion flooded his chest so intensely it hurt to breathe. He'd been Wade for 6 months, had accepted that designation because Lily needed to choose her own names for the people in her life. But hearing her offer this, hearing her want to claim him as father, it felt like forgiveness and redemption and second chance all compressed into 3-letter word. His voice came out rough. You can call me whatever feels right. Dad feels right. Wade set down his tools, pulled her into a hug that lasted until the moment felt complete. When they separated, both had tears on their faces that neither bothered to hide. Then Dad it is. They returned to the motorcycle, working in companionable silence that required no filling. Tucker emerged from the garage bay, took in the scene, smiled and retreated without interrupting. Marcus was teaching self-defense class in the parking lot. 6 kids from the neighborhood learning how to fall safely, how to break grips, how to say no with voices and bodies. Leo sat in his office monitoring security systems that had expanded to cover Emma's house, ensuring that the children sheltered there could sleep without fear. The sun touched horizon, painting desert in colors that hurt to witness, oranges and purples and reds, so saturated they seemed artificial. Wade thought about the day Lily had walked through his garage doors, limping and terrified, whispering words that had changed everything. I can't close my legs. It hurts. She'd been broken then, barely holding together, trusting strangers because she'd run out of safer options. Now she laughed freely, slept peacefully, challenged him when she thought he was wrong, hugged him when she needed comfort, called him Dad because the word meant something she'd chosen rather than something biology had imposed. The transformation was remarkable, not because it was complete trauma didn't heal that cleanly, but because it was happening, because each day she became slightly more herself than she'd been the day before. Wade had spent 5 years after Emma's death believing his purpose had died with her, that he'd failed at the one thing that mattered most. But watching Lily hand him a wrench while explaining something she'd learned about gear ratios, hearing her call him Dad, with voice full of certainty, he understood now that purpose didn't die. It transformed. It found new shapes. Emma would never come back. That wound would never fully close. But maybe saving Lily wasn't about replacing his daughter. Maybe it was about honoring her memory by refusing to let another child suffer when he had power to prevent it. Maybe redemption wasn't erasing past failures, but making future choices that balanced the scales. Lily tugged his sleeve, pulling him from thoughts that had gone too heavy. "You okay?" Wade smiled, the expression coming easier now than it had 6 months ago. "Yeah, kiddo, I'm good. Just thinking about how lucky I am. Because you found me. Because you found me, you walked into that garage when you could have gone anywhere, could have asked anyone for help. You chose us. That's a gift I'll never take for granted." Lily processed his words with the careful consideration she applied to everything, then nodded decisively. "I'm glad I found you too. Even if my legs hurt really bad that day and I was scared, I'm glad I walked through that door." They worked until darkness fell and Marcus called everyone inside for dinner. Tucker had made chili. Leo had picked up cornbread from the bakery downtown. Marcus was setting table with care that suggested he took domestic duties as seriously as he took everything else. They ate together, conversation flowing easily. Lily telling stories about school, while the men listened with attention that never felt patronizing. After dinner, Lily completed homework at the kitchen table Wade had installed in his apartment above the garage. Tucker helped with math problems. Leo assisted with reading comprehension. Marcus made hot chocolate because evenings were getting cold, and comfort drinks made everything better. Wade supervised from across the room, feeling contentment that was simple and profound. At bedtime, Lily brushed her teeth and changed into pajamas covered with cartoon motorcycles. Tucker had found them online, and the irony was too perfect to resist. Wade tucked her in, sitting on edge of her bed like he'd done every night for 6 months, their routine comfortable through repetition. "Story tonight, or you want to read by yourself? Can you tell me about Emma?" Wade had expected this question, eventually had been surprised it took 6 months to arrive. He considered how much truth to share, how much detail was appropriate, finally settled on honesty because Lily deserved that. Emma was smart, loved books, especially fantasy stories about kids who went on adventures. She wanted to be a writer when she grew up, fill notebooks with stories she'd make up during car rides. She was brave too, faced cancer treatments, refined without complaint, kept smiling even when she felt terrible. His voice roughened, but he continued. "She would have liked you. You're both fighters. Both refused to let circumstances make you bitter or cruel. Emma stayed kind until the end, and you've stayed hopeful despite everything that happened. That's rare. That's worth celebrating." Lily absorbed this, clearly processing implications of being compared favorably to the daughter Wade had lost. "Do you think she'd be mad that you care about me?" Now, Wade's answer was immediate and certain. "Emma would be proud. She always wanted me to help. People used to get upset when I'd walk past homeless folks without giving them money or food. She believed everyone deserved kindness. If she could see this, you living here, Emma's house, helping other kids, her memory being honored by protecting children, she'd be thrilled." Lily smiled, satisfied with this answer in ways Wade hadn't anticipated. "Then I'll try to make her proud. Make both of you proud. You already do, every single day." He kissed her forehead, dimmed the lights, left her door cracked, so hallway light provided comfort without disturbing sleep. Outside her room, Tucker stood with expressions suggesting he'd been listening, had heard the exchange and been moved by it. "You're good at this. Fatherhood. Better than you probably believe." Wade shrugged, uncomfortable with praise he wasn't sure he'd earned. "I'm making it up as I go, hoping instinct and genuine care are enough." They are. Look at her thriving, healing, becoming herself. That's because of environment you created, family you built. Don't discount what you've accomplished. They descended stairs to garage below where Marcus was closing bay doors for the night, where Leo was running final security checks before sleep. This crew that had started as military brothers, then became biker club, had evolved into something else entirely. Caregivers, protectors, family by choice rather than blood. Wade thought about the text message he'd received 6 months ago. The threat that had promised Lily would come home, one way or another. That threat had been empty, made by a desperate man who'd lost control and couldn't accept it. Travis Holbrook would spend years in prison, would emerge older and hopefully wiser, but unable to hurt Lily ever again. His power had been revealed as illusion maintained only through fear and enabled by corruption that eventually collapsed under scrutiny. The real power, the kind that endured and mattered, came from the choices made in moments when easier options were abundant. Wade could have called 911 when Lily walked through that door, could have passed responsibility to systems designed to handle such situations, could have maintained distance between himself and problem that wasn't his to solve. Instead, he'd chosen involvement, had risked reputation and freedom and peace of mind to protect child who'd needed protecting. That choice had cost him sleep, had brought violence to his doorstep, had forced him to confront grief and failure he'd buried for 5 years. But it had also given him purpose, had shown him that his story wasn't over just because Emma's had ended, that redemption was possible when you stopped trying to undo past and started building better future. Above the garage, Lily slept peacefully in bedroom that was truly hers, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love her, protected by men who'd proven that leather jackets and rough exteriors could contain fierce gentleness. She was 7 years old, recovering from trauma that would mark her forever, building resilience that would serve her for lifetime. She'd walked into Morrison's garage limping and terrified, whispering words that had cracked Wade's world open. "I can't close my legs. It hurts." Those words had been invitation and accusation and desperate plea combined. They'd demanded response, had refused to allow indifference, had made Wade choose whether he'd be the kind of man who looked away or the kind who stepped forward. He'd stepped forward. They all had. And in doing so, they'd discovered that sometimes heroes don't wear badges or capes. Sometimes they show up in denim and leather, choosing to stand between child and pain that tried to break her. Sometimes protection is choice made with scarred hands, and violent pasts maintained through vigilance, and genuine care proven through actions rather than promises. The garage lights dimmed, security systems armed. 4 men settled into sleep rotations that would keep watch through darkness, because threats didn't honor schedules and safety required eternal vigilance. Above them, a 7-year-old girl dreamed without nightmares, her breathing even, and her face peaceful, finally understanding what home was supposed to feel like. Wade Morrison had failed to save his daughter from cancer, but he'd succeeded in saving Lily Carter from human cruelty. That didn't erase Emma's loss, didn't make grief disappear, didn't mean he'd stop missing his little girl. But it meant his failure wasn't final, meant redemption was possible when you open yourself to second chances, meant that sometimes the universe offered opportunities to get something right even after you'd gotten so much wrong. Family wasn't who you were born to. It was who stayed when leaving was easier, who fought when surrender was simpler, who chose you when choosing came at cost. Wade and his crew had chosen Lily, and she'd chosen them back. That was legacy worth leaving.